Imagine this. A man sits at his desk long after the world has gone to sleep. The glow of his laptop paints his face in pale light as numbers fill the screen. Earnings, expenses, projections, investments. He should feel proud. By every external measure, he's made it. Yet as the numbers grow, so does the quiet unease inside him. He's surrounded by everything he once wanted, yet he feels strangely hollow, like he's running on a treadmill that never stops, only speeds up. That man could be any of us, because somewhere deep down, every person suspects that money isn't what it seems, yet we spend years chasing it as if it holds the key to our peace. We grow up believing that freedom has a price tag. We are told that if we can just earn enough, save enough, invest enough, then life will open up its gates and finally let us rest. So we run faster each year, chasing the promise of someday. Someday when the account is full. Someday when the house is paid. Someday when the work slows down. But someday has a way of always staying just out of reach. It whispers from the horizon, keeping us moving but never arriving. We live in a time where abundance is louder than ever, yet peace feels rarer by the day. We scroll past images of success, the cars, the homes, the vacations, and without even noticing, we compare our quiet lives to curated illusions. We start measuring our worth in digits, our joy in possessions, and our progress by how efficiently we can consume. But as the external world grows richer, the inner world often grows poorer. Wealth, as Seneca once wrote, consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. And yet we've built an economy of endless wanting, where satisfaction is postponed until the next milestone, the next purchase, the next promotion. There's a strange paradox hiding in plain sight. The more we pursue money, the more it begins to pursue us, in our thoughts, our choices, even our sleep. It starts as ambition, which is healthy, but somewhere along the way it hardens into anxiety. We begin to live not for creation, but for accumulation. We sacrifice presence for progress, unaware that the finish line keeps moving. And when we finally pause, we realize that the pursuit of freedom has quietly become another form of bondage. The great trap of modern life is mistaking movement for meaning. We work longer hours, fill our calendars, and chase busyness as if it were a badge of honor. But what are we really trying to earn? Most of the time, it's not more money. It's a feeling. The feeling of safety, of being seen, of finally being enough. Beneath every goal of financial success lies an emotional root. The need to feel secure in a world that never stops shifting. But money can only ever meet the surface of that need. It cannot touch the core of it. Perhaps that's why no amount ever feels like enough. Because money by its nature can only buy comfort, not contentment. It can open doors, but it can't decide what you do once you walk through them. It can build walls, but it can't make you feel safe inside them. True freedom isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the size of your peace when everything else fades away. Consider the story of a woman who spent 20 years building her career from the ground up. She rose through the ranks, earned respect, and achieved the kind of income she once only dreamed of. But when asked what she wanted most, her answer was quiet and immediate. I want to feel light again. Her words reveal what most people eventually learn, that financial freedom without emotional freedom is just a prettier version of captivity. We don't actually want money. We want what we think it will bring us: ease, security, choice, self-worth. And yet we keep trying to solve internal hunger with external accumulation. Like pouring water into a bucket with no bottom, the more we pour, the more we lose. There's a restlessness that no paycheck can soothe, a longing that no luxury can quiet. It is not the man who has too little, Seneca reminds us again, but the man who craves more that is poor. The truth is, money was never the goal. It was the mirror. It reflects our beliefs, our fears, our sense of worth. For some, it mirrors scarcity, the fear that there will never be enough. For others, it mirrors control, the illusion that if they have enough, they can finally stop worrying. But both illusions dissolve when you understand this simple truth. Financial freedom begins not with earning more, but with changing what you're earning for. When you see money as energy, not security, it changes the way you move through the world. You stop chasing it like prey and start cultivating it like a garden, with care, patience, and purpose. You begin to recognize that the richest people aren't those who have the most, but those who need the least. That wealth is not a number, but a state of mind. the calm knowing that you already have what you need to live meaningfully. Imagine a world where your worth was not tied to your wage, where success wasn't defined by excess, and where more was replaced with enough. What would that feel like? Probably lighter, simpler, more human, because the pursuit of freedom is not about escaping work, but about transforming the reason you do it. When your work becomes an expression of who you are, rather than a race for validation, money begins to flow differently. It becomes a byproduct of alignment, not anxiety. There is a quiet kind of wealth that doesn't show up on balance sheets. It lives in your mornings, nights when you wake without dread. It lives in your evening, when you can rest without worry. It lives in the choices you make not out of fear, but out of freedom. That's the kind of wealth this world rarely celebrates. But it's the only kind that lasts. As Napoleon Hill once said, "The real measure of your wealth is how much you'd be worth if you lost all your money." Those words invite us to look inward, to measure ourselves not by accumulation, but by authenticity. What remains when the markets crash, when the status fades, when the applause stops? What's left then is the truest form of capital: your character, your peace, your purpose. So perhaps the great question is not, how much money do I need to be free? But rather, who must I become to live freely with what I have? When you ask that question honestly, the chase begins to slow. The urgency dissolves. You stop running after wealth and start walking toward wisdom. You begin to see that financial freedom is not the destination of the journey. It's the reflection of a soul that has already come home to itself. And maybe that's where this story begins. Not with strategies or spreadsheets, but with a single shift in awareness that the thing we've been chasing was never money at all, but peace disguised as prosperity. Most people treat money like a destination on a map, an address to reach, a milestone to pin, a bank balance to hit before they allow themselves to breathe. But step back and look at it another way, not as a place but as a mirror, and the world shifts. Money reveals what you worship, what you fear, and what you trust. It reflects not only your habits, but the quality of your engagement with the world, how you create what you offer, and how willing you are to exchange value with another human being. When you begin to see money as a mirror, the challenge becomes less about accumulation and more about alignment, aligning what you produce with what the world genuinely needs and values. We are taught that money rewards effort, and there is truth in that, but effort alone is blind if it isn't pointed at value. You can work tirelessly and still walk in circles if your labor doesn't solve a problem, serve a need, or add something meaningful to someone else's life. The more useful truth, the one that quietly separates fleeting paydays from sustained prosperity, is that money rewards value, not the noise of busyness, not the appearance of productivity, but the substance of contribution. Imagine a small shop tucked into an old neighborhood. The owner works long hours, yes, but what keeps people coming back is not the time spent behind the counter. It is the quality of the bread, the warmth of the service, the trust customers place in that place to meet a real need. That trust, converted into repeated transactions, is the currency of lasting wealth. Picture a marketplace where every coin carries more than metal or paper. Imagine each coin as an imprint of trust, a tiny contract between two lives. When you give value, a trusted product, a helpful service, an honest idea, the other person offers you their trust in return, often in the form of money. Each exchange then becomes a whisper of mutual belief. I believe you created something worth my time and attention. You believe my payment honors that worth. Over time, these whispers compound into a reputation, and reputation becomes capital. The quiet work of building value is rarely dramatic, but it is profound. It stitches together human faith in a way that spreadsheets cannot fully capture. There is an inevitable temptation to try to outwit this system, to look for shortcuts that let you bend the laws of exchange. The glamour of a quick windfall is intoxicating. A viral hit, a lucky trade, a landing of a big client. Yet these moments are exceptions that distract us from the rule. Real wealth follows inner alignment, not outer hustle. You cannot indefinitely substitute connection for calculation. The person who learns to serve consistently, to refine craft by small improvements, and to nurture relationships will, more often than not, outlast the genius of a single lucky stroke. You do not rise to the level of your goals, James Clear reminds us. You fall to the level of your systems. The systems that create value are quiet and repetitive. not flashy. They are the small acts of integrity that show up long after the excitement fades. The deeper misunderstanding we carry is not technical. It is emotional. We chase money in the hope of feeling secure, but the chase itself breeds insecurity. When you frame money as a shield against fear, every fluctuation becomes a threat, every setback a catastrophe. Your attention narrows, your choices are driven by scarcity, and you begin to confuse the accumulation of assets with the accumulation of peace. In contrast, when you begin to treat money as energy that moves where it is respected and multiplied, you shift from hoarding towards stewardship. Stewardship turns anxiety into responsibility. It invites you to tend the resources you have with care, to invest your attention where it yields the greatest return in human terms, not just numerical ones. Seeing money as energy changes the rhythm of how you live. Instead of sprinting toward the next payday, you cultivate a pace that honors patience and reciprocity. You learn to ask different questions, not how fast can I get rich, but how can I create something that outlasts my impatience? You begin to appreciate compounding not as a financial trick, but as a life principle. Small acts repeated over time yield disproportionate results. The person who saves a little, learns a little, shows up a little more than yesterday, eventually finds that these increments turn into a quiet abundance that no frantic leap could produce. This is the rhythm that underlies both gardens and businesses and friendships: slow tending, consistent care, faith in process. The doorway into this new relationship with money is surprisingly simple and profoundly difficult. It requires a change in how you measure success, a recalibration of what you honor in your daily life. Instead of tracking only receipts and returns, begin to notice trust accrued, problems solved, and the ease in which you can say no to things that do not align with your values. Real wealth does not merely increase what you own. It enlarges your capacity to give, to create, and to rest. The person who masters this understands that earning is not the end of value. It is the signal that value has been recognized. What matters most is not the applause of market success, but the steadiness of your inner currency. Integrity, patience, and curiosity. This realization, that money moves toward value, patience, and trust, is not a moral scolding but an invitation. It invites you to shift from tactics to temperament, from frantic acquisition to intentional contribution. It asks you to look at your work and your choices and wonder whether they reflect a desire to be seen or a desire to serve. When you answer honestly, your decisions begin to change in ways that spreadsheets alone cannot predict. The movement from chasing money to understanding its movement opens up not only new financial possibilities, but a richer, more humane way of being in the world. Hold that thought gently, because the next part of this journey asks a quieter question. What does it mean to treat money as energy rather than security? And how does that change the small choices you make each day? That inquiry is where philosophy meets practice, and where patience begins to show its face in the ledger of your life. Every dollar you touch carries more than its face value. It carries an echo, the faint signature of the moment someone found your work useful, comforting, or necessary. Think of money not as cold metal or sterile digits, but as the residue of service, a small physical acknowledgement that value moved from one person to another. When you sell a meal, advise a client, design a product, or solve a problem, that exchange leaves a trace. Over time, these traces accumulate into a pattern, a language that tells you what the world truly values about your contribution. To listen to that language is to learn where your worth aligns with other people's needs, and to move from random effort toward intentional creation. Growth in finance, if observed without the dramatics of headlines and hype, resembles growth in nature more than it does a sprint. Trees don't grow by faster thinking. They grow by patient rooting. Rivers carve canyons not by sudden force, but by persistent motion. Financial growth obeys similar unseen laws: patience, rhythm, reciprocity. These are not abstract platitudes. They are operating principles. Patience asks you to wait while the seed you planted consolidates. Rhythm reminds you that cycles matter, saving in some seasons, spending in others, learning constantly. Reciprocity insists that what you give tends to return, often in unexpected forms. There is an impatience inside most of us that wants to command money, to bend it to our will, to accelerate its arrival, to force outcomes so we feel safe. That impulse is understandable. Time presses on everyone, yet the wise approach is less about domination and more about collaboration. Imagine working with an old reliable friend rather than hiring a mercenary. Collaboration asks for patience, communication, and respect. It assumes a shared goal and mutual benefit. Money, considered as energy, responds best to that posture. When you treat it as something you engage with rather than something you seize, your choices naturally shift toward long-term stewardship rather than short-term gain. As we change our posture toward money, something curious happens to our decision-making. We slow down. The frenzy of chasing a next big break softens into a quieter question. Does this choice honor the value I want to offer? Suddenly, the metrics that matter change from velocity to durability. Instead of asking how fast I can accumulate, you ask how sustainably you can contribute. The mirror begins to do its work. Money reveals not only what you make, but what you are becoming while you make it. In this reflective space, purpose gains weight over panic, and intention replaces reaction. This is where language matters. Asking, "How much can I make?" is a different kind of hunger than asking, "How much can I create?" The first frames the world as a series of targets to capture. The second frames it as a field to cultivate. Creation carries with it the notion of patience and care. It implies that your work is meant to last, to be refined, to be offered with generosity. When you choose creation, money becomes a signal, a report of whose lives you've touched and how deeply, rather than an end in itself. That subtle shift in question changes the entire architecture of a life. Priorities rearrange, schedules soften, and courage finds room to grow. Money as a teacher is a strange but useful idea. When treated as energy, it no longer serves as a source of fear but as a feedback system. It tells you where your contributions are recognized and where they are not. It shows you when your time has been well spent and when it has not. In the words of Morgan Housel, doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. That behavioral lens turns finance into psychology and psychology into practice. The student of money pays attention to patterns, tends to relationships, and accepts that growth is irregular, sometimes slow, and occasionally surprising. The final, quieter truth is that every outer law of wealth begins with an inner law of self. You cannot compound wealth in the world without compounding integrity inside. You cannot build a business that honors customers if you do not honor your own commitments first. This is not a moralistic claim, but a practical one. Character scales where shortcuts break. When your inner life is steady, the energy you put into the world carries a different quality. A steadiness that invites trust, and trust invites circulation. So the work is twofold. Refine your craft, yes, but also refine your heart. Learn to let money teach you about your fears, your generosity, and your capacity to wait. Hold this awareness gently as you move forward. Money is more than currency. It is the weather of human exchange, and if you learn to read it, you will make better choices about where to plant, when to water, and how long to stay. This shift from fear to curiosity, from command to collaboration, opens a path where prosperity becomes less about frantic acquisition and more about faithful contribution. In that place, the question that guides you is no longer how to amass, but how to become the kind of person whose work naturally invites abundance. The world loves speed. We glorify the one who gets there first, who doubles their income overnight, who turns a spark of opportunity into a headline success story before the ink dries on yesterday's failures. We are trained from childhood to associate movement with achievement. The faster, the better. Our calendars are full, our days are compressed, our ambitions measured by how much we can do before the sun sets. Yet beneath this obsession with acceleration lies a quieter law, one the world rarely celebrates, but time always honors, the law of rhythm. Where speed chases results, rhythm builds roots, and while the impatient may win attention, it is rhythm that wins endurance. Imagine a farmer at the edge of his field. He has just finished sowing the seeds, the same way he has every spring for as long as he can remember. He knows that after the planting comes the waiting. There is no shortcut to harvest, no clever hack that bends the laws of nature to human urgency. The soil must hold, the rain must fall, the sun must return. His wealth is not in what he can predict, but in what he can trust, that the unseen process will work if he honors it. The gambler, meanwhile, bets on storms and windfalls. He wants the future now, the harvest today. But the farmer knows something deeper, that life's richest rewards compound in silence, and no amount of panic can rush what's meant to ripen in its own time, compounding, that miraculous force that turns a few dollars into a fortune or a few minutes of effort into mastery, is often taught as a financial formula. But in truth, it's a philosophy. It is the belief that time, given trust, multiplies what patience protects. To compound is to accept that small acts repeated faithfully have more power than great acts performed impulsively. Whether it's money invested, knowledge gathered, or relationships nurtured, compounding teaches us that slow is not a disadvantage, it's the mechanism through which greatness grows. The most reliable form of acceleration is consistency. The paradox is that by slowing down enough to stay steady, we move faster toward lasting wealth than those chasing constant acceleration. Still, most of us are trapped in a modern illusion that constant motion equals progress. We fill our schedules, trade our attention for alerts, and believe that if we are busy enough, we must be advancing. Yet movement without direction only deepens exhaustion. It's like rowing a boat in circles. There's effort, sweat, even momentum, but no distance gained. True growth requires stillness between strokes, time to realign with where we're heading. When every decision is fueled by restlessness, even our successes feel fragile. The ones who master wealth are rarely those moving the fastest. They are the ones who know when to pause, to let their choices mature before harvesting results. This is the great contradiction of our age. The more we demand immediacy, the further we drift from true prosperity. In chasing instant gratification, we unknowingly trade away compounding potential. The stock sold too early, the business abandoned too soon, the skill left half-developed. Each moment of impatience steals exponential returns from our future selves. We forget that wealth in every form is cumulative. It builds quietly in the background while we're busy doubting its progress. Just because we can't see the growth doesn't mean it's not happening. Like the seed beneath the soil, the most important transformations are invisible until the day they're undeniable. Somewhere along the way, we learned to fear stillness. Waiting feels like losing in a culture of urgency. But patience isn't passivity, it's participation with time. To be patient is not to sit idle, but to act with faith that time is your ally, not your adversary. The great investors, builders, and creators understand this intimately. They do not gamble on speed. They collaborate with duration. Warren Buffett once said that the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. But beyond the markets, that truth applies to all of life. The impatient exchange tomorrow's abundance for today's anxiety. The patient, however, quietly multiply in peace. When we finally surrender to time, growth begins, quietly, invisibly, faithfully. It's the moment when you stop forcing outcomes and start tending to processes. The moment when effort becomes rhythm instead of reaction. There's a subtle shift in the heart. From control to trust. You realize that mastery and wealth, like gardens, cannot be bullied into existence. They must be cultivated, respected, and revisited with care. You water the soil, you adjust the light, but you don't pull the seed to see if it's growing. You trust the process, because you understand that impatience uproots what only patience can reveal. If you look back on your own life, you'll likely see that your biggest transformations didn't arrive overnight. The opportunities that shaped you most probably came slowly, through seasons of uncertainty, trial, and unseen progress. You didn't grow by prediction. You grew by persistence. And that is the essence of the law of growth, that predictability is less powerful than patience. We can forecast and plan, but the future will unfold according to its own rhythm. Our role is to stay aligned, disciplined, and open to the compounding effects of consistency. Life is not a race to finish lines. It's a dance with timing. In wealth building, this understanding changes everything. It transforms investing from speculation into stewardship. It turns ambition into artistry. When you operate from rhythm instead of reaction, your decisions gain coherence. You're no longer tempted by every quick profit or trend because you know what you're building, something that will endure. You start to see that real wealth isn't the rush of sudden gain. It's the quiet stability that emerges when patience meets purpose. Every choice made in alignment with that truth deepens your foundation. So the next time you feel behind, remember the farmer. Remember that beneath the surface of your efforts, compounding is at work, invisible but unstoppable. Remember that rhythm is not slowness. It's alignment with the natural tempo of growth. Wealth doesn't need to be forced. It needs to be fostered. The universe does not reward panic. It rewards persistence. And the question that remains, the one worth carrying into every season of your life, is simple but powerful. Are you patient enough to let your wealth become what it's meant to be, a reflection of your maturity, not your momentum? When you can answer yes, you'll find that time itself begins to cooperate with you. The same minutes that once felt like obstacles now become partners in your progress. You'll notice that your choices start to compound in ways that feel almost effortless, because you've stopped trying to sprint your way to wisdom. You've chosen rhythm over rush, patience over prediction. And in that quiet partnership with time, you'll discover the truest form of freedom, the kind that grows not from speed, but from surrender. One of the most dangerous illusions we fall into, often without realizing it, is the belief that money bends to our will. We imagine that if we plan enough, push enough, or control enough variables, we can make life obey us. We treat money as something to be conquered, a wild force we can tame through cleverness or grit. But in truth, money is not a creature of command. It is a reflection of awareness. It does not respond to how tightly we grasp, but to how clearly we see. Awareness is the quiet architect behind every sustainable fortune, an invisible rhythm guiding how value moves through our lives. When we lose that awareness, when our vision narrows to control, abundance slips away, not because it's gone, but because we've squeezed out the space it needs to flow. We cling to outcomes the way a child clings to a balloon, terrified it might float away. We grip our goals so tightly that life itself can't breathe into them. And in doing so, we forget a fundamental truth. Growth requires oxygen. Creation needs room to expand. When we micromanage every detail, we rob our dreams of the very spontaneity that could make them thrive. We think that control equals safety, but what it often creates is suffocation. You can't control the wind, but you can set your sails. The art of wealth, and like the art of sailing, is learning to adjust, to move with the current rather than against it. To trust that direction comes not from domination, but from alignment. The more we try to force abundance, the more it slips through our fingers. It's like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. The tighter you grip, the faster it escapes. Every investor, entrepreneur, or dreamer eventually encounters this truth. The harder you chase certainty, the more uncertain life becomes. There's a story about a trader who spent years trying to beat the market. He woke before dawn, devoured financial reports, watched the charts like a hawk, convinced that with enough control he could outsmart risk itself. But the market, like life, doesn't bend to obsession. It rewards clarity, not tension. One day, exhausted and disillusioned, he stepped back. He stopped trying to force outcomes and started observing patterns instead. Over time, his results improved, not because he had found the perfect strategy, but because he had learned the discipline of detachment. His greatest profit came not from a trade, but from a shift in consciousness. Control is seductive because it masks fear. It gives us the illusion of power, the comfort of thinking that if we just try harder, we can keep uncertainty at bay. But fear disguised as control drains us faster than any loss ever could. It makes us chase perfection instead of progress, and worry replaces wisdom. At its core, this fear is ancient. The fear of loss, the fear of not having enough, the fear of falling behind. We clutch our money, our plans, our identities, thinking that security lives in possession. Yet real security comes not from holding tighter, but from trusting deeper. When you realize that wealth, in its truest sense, flows where there is space, the need to control begins to dissolve. Letting go does not mean giving up. It means releasing the illusion that you can manage every twist of fate. It means cooperating with the natural order rather than fighting it. This is the paradox of prosperity. Surrender, not struggle, is what allows it to multiply. A river doesn't push against its banks. It flows within them. Likewise, abundance doesn't resist. It responds. The universe has always operated on reciprocity. What you release makes room for what is meant to arrive. When you trust this law, you stop measuring your worth by your grip and start measuring it by your grace. You learn to work diligently but detach from the outcome, to build faithfully without demanding immediate reward. And in that space of calm detachment, opportunities often appear that force could never have summoned. This doesn't mean life becomes effortless. It means the effort changes texture. Instead of frantic striving, Your actions start to carry the rhythm of trust. You work from intention, not tension. You plan, you prepare, but you remain open to surprise. When you approach money with this mindset, it begins to reflect that same energy back into calm, reliable flowing. The wealthiest souls are not those who control every variable, but those who understand the laws that already govern them. They operate from awareness, not anxiety. They know that wealth is not something to be captured, but something to be allowed. Think of those who seem to live in effortless prosperity, not the loud or ostentatious, but the truly wealthy in spirit. They are not frantic, nor are they obsessed. They move with a kind of ease that feels earned, a quiet knowing that what is meant for them will arrive in due time. They understand timing, they respect cycles, and they live in a steady conversation with life itself. To them, wealth is not a race but a relationship, one that deepens with trust. Their success does not come from luck or manipulation, but from alignment with principles that do not waver. They are free because they have nothing left to grip. Freedom, after all, is not the absence of effort. It's the absence of obsession. Detachment is not indifference. It is mastery of focus. When you no longer need outcomes to validate your worth, your energy shifts from fear to creation. You begin to enjoy the process, to see wealth not as a trophy but as a teacher. And this shift changes everything. Your decisions become clearer, your timing sharper, your opportunities more organic. What once felt forced now flows. Life begins to mirror the peace you carry, and abundance follows the calm of a grounded mind. To live by the law of detachment is to live in trust. Trust that the seeds you've planted will grow. Trust that the effort you've given will return. Trust that the timing you can't control is wiser than your impatience. It means doing your best work, and then releasing it to the current, knowing that every outcome has its own perfect rhythm. The hands that build must also know when to open. For if you never release what you've built, how will you receive what's next? In the end, detachment is not about losing control. It's about realizing you never needed it to begin with. The pursuit of control drains energy. The practice of awareness restores it. And when awareness leads, money follows. When peace becomes your foundation, prosperity becomes your reflection. True wealth does not demand. It allows, it does not chase. It attracts. It does not fear uncertainty. It trusts the process that uncertainty makes possible. So breathe. Unclench your fist. Let go of the need to predict, to guarantee, to know. Let your energy flow where your intentions are pure and your actions aligned. In that surrender, you rediscover what freedom feels like. Effortless prosperity born not from control but from peace. That's when money stops being your master and becomes your mirror, faithfully reflecting the calm confidence of a mind no longer at war with time. Every financial decision we make, every purchase, every investment, every moment of hesitation or risk, reveals more about our inner world than we might ever admit. Money is not just a medium of exchange, it's a mirror. It reflects what we truly believe about ourselves, how much we trust, how much we fear, and how deeply we believe we are worthy of having more. When we hand over $1, when we hesitate to invest, when we chase another deal even after reaching our goals, these are not random actions. They are the visible fingerprints of invisible beliefs. Most people think they're managing their finances, but what they're really managing is emotion. And until we learn to see money as a reflection of the mind that commands it, we'll keep treating the symptom while ignoring the source. Consider two people earning the exact same income. On paper, they look identical. Yet one sleeps peacefully at night, secure in their decisions, while the other lies awake, haunted by the feeling that it could all disappear tomorrow. One saves with confidence, knowing there will always be more opportunities to create. The other hoards from fear, convinced that every dollar must be guarded or it will vanish. What separates them isn't intelligence or strategy. It's consciousness. It's the difference between seeing money as an ally and seeing it as a threat. The anxious saver moves from scarcity. The peaceful investor moves from trust. And that trust, though invisible, creates entirely different results in the visible world. Because when fear drives the wheel, even good roads feel dangerous. We've been taught to think of money as a logical pursuit, a game of numbers and decisions. But in truth, it's emotional first and rational second. Every spreadsheet hides a story. Every financial plan conceals a belief about what it means to be secure, successful, or significant. Many people live trapped inside that unspoken story. They earn, they spend, they save, but they never question the script that drives those choices. If I earn more, I'll finally feel safe. If I reach this number, I'll finally relax. If I buy this, I'll finally feel like I made it. But here's the quiet truth: you can't solve an internal void with external figures. You can't fill a belief of not enough by adding zeros. The problem isn't the math, it's the meaning we've attached to it. When we start changing that meaning, everything else begins to move. A person who shifts their internal dialogue from fear to faith notices that their outer life begins to reflect that same calm. They make decisions with more patience, more confidence, and less desperation. Their spending aligns with values, not vanity. Their investments carry intention, not impulse. It's as if the universe finally starts cooperating. But what's really happening is that they've stopped resisting themselves. Money begins to follow clarity. It's not magic. It's resonance. Your finances mirror the frequency of your mind. When you operate from scarcity, your results shrink to match it. When you operate from sufficiency, your results expand to reflect it. At some point, a quiet realization dawns. It was never about the numbers. It was always about the narrative. Numbers are neutral. They don't carry judgment, emotion, or story. It's the human mind that gives them weight. $10 in the hands of gratitude feels abundant. 10,000 in the hands of fear feels insufficient. The same currency, but entirely different experiences. We live not by our bank statements, but by our beliefs about them. The person who learns to master their inner dialogue about worth, security, and enoughness doesn't just change their financial life. They change the emotional lens through which wealth is experienced. This is where discipline, gratitude, and patience reveal their true power. They are not moral virtues to be practiced for approval. They are currencies of alignment. Discipline is how you communicate respect to your future self. Gratitude is how you remind your present self that you already have enough. And patience is how you express faith in the unseen, in the compounding forces that time will bring. When these qualities are alive in you, money becomes stable because you are stable. You stop reacting to every fluctuation as if it's a crisis. You stop making decisions from the tension of what if, and begin acting from the wisdom of when it's time. Financial freedom, then, is not about accumulating without worry. It's about mastering the energy that creates both. Think of a gardener tending to soil. They don't scream at the seeds to sprout faster. They don't dig them up every morning to check if they're growing. They water, they trust, they wait. Their peace comes not from knowing the exact day the first sprout will appear, but from understanding that growth, by its nature, is inevitable when the conditions are right. The same principle governs wealth. The right conditions are internal: discipline, gratitude, patience. When they're present, money grows naturally. When they're absent, even abundance feels fleeting. As the mind heals, so does our relationship with money. The panic that once surrounded finances begins to dissolve. Decisions that used to feel paralyzing become simple. You stop asking, "Will this make me rich?" and start asking, "Does this align with who I'm becoming?" This subtle shift, from strategy to self-awareness, transforms the entire landscape of your financial life. The friction that once drained your energy turns into flow. Opportunities find you more easily, because you're no longer chasing them from a place of lack. Relationships with people, work, and money itself begin to harmonize. You don't force prosperity anymore. You invite it. From that awareness, growth ceases to be an ambition and becomes a natural consequence. You no longer need to prove your worth through accumulation, because your worth is already internalized. You no longer fear loss, because you've realized that what you can create once, you can create again. You stop seeking wealth to validate your identity and begin using wealth to express it. Money becomes what it was always meant to be, a mirror reflecting the maturity of your mind, the steadiness of your emotions, and the integrity of your intentions. When the reflection is clear, the results become inevitable. The anxious saver transforms into the peaceful investor. The fearful spender evolves into the conscious creator. The one who once sought to control money now collaborates with it, a dance instead of a struggle. And this harmony doesn't just make you richer in finance, it makes you richer in life. Because when your inner world is aligned, the outer world can't help but respond in kind. In the end, every financial journey is really an inward one. The balance sheet is only the echo of the belief system. The economy outside is a reflection of the economy within. When you understand this, you stop chasing the mirror and start shaping the reflection. You begin to see money not as a measure of success, but as feedback, a messenger reminding you of how aligned or divided your inner world is. And that realization, that money mirrors the mind, is the quiet revolution of true financial mastery. When you learn to see wealth this way, everything changes. You no longer fight against the flow of life. You flow with it. You stop asking, how do I get more? And begin asking, how do I become more? Because the moment you evolve, so does your reflection. The numbers will always follow the narrative. And the narrative, your beliefs, your peace, your patience, is entirely within your power to rewrite. True wealth has never been a matter of accumulation. It has always been a matter of movement. Money, like blood in the body or water in a river, exists to circulate. The moment it stops flowing, it begins to decay, not in the physical sense, but in its energy, its purpose, its meaning. You can sense it in people who hold their money with fear. They become like misers guarding treasure they'll never touch, mistaking stillness for safety. Yet that very act of clinging breeds stagnation. Money that does not move, serve, or grow eventually loses its vitality, just as a river that stops flowing turns into a pool of poison. True wealth, then, is alive, and aliveness is sustained through circulation and service. Think for a moment of nature's design. The ocean gives rise to clouds. The clouds fall as rain. The rain feeds the soil, and the soil gives life to the seed. Everything returns to its source, replenished and multiplied. Life itself depends on exchange, giving and receiving, contribution and renewal. Money obeys this same universal rhythm. When it is hoarded in fear, it suffocates. When it is released in faith, it regenerates. Those who understand this don't give to impress or to prove their virtue. They give because they understand the law of flow, that prosperity is not held, but harmonized. There's an old story of a merchant who lived through a great famine. While others built walls around their granaries, he opened his doors and fed those who were hungry. People thought he was a fool, that generosity in a time of scarcity was suicide. Yet as the famine stretched on, he never ran out. Somehow, through means no one could explain, his stores replenished faster than they were emptied. Years later, when the rains returned and abundance filled the land again, the merchant was wealthier than before, not because of luck, but because of alignment. He had learned to participate in the law that governs all creation. What you circulate returns. Not always from the same source, not always in the same form, but always in rhythm with the energy you release. When we give time, talent, resources, kindness, something subtle but profound happens. We open channels of trust between ourselves and the universe. We affirm a truth that fear tries to hide from us, that there is enough, that we are enough, that letting go does not lead to loss. Generosity is not the act of losing. It's the act of aligning. It turns scarcity into stewardship, the understanding that we don't own wealth, we guide it. We are custodians, not controllers. The wealth that moves through our hands carries the energy we give it. If we give from fear, we create resistance. If we give from faith, we create flow. But this doesn't mean reckless spending or blind charity. Flow is not chaos, it's conscious circulation. The same way the heart pumps blood only where it nourishes, so too should money flow where it gives life, to people, ideas, and causes that uplift rather than deplete. The most successful creators, entrepreneurs, and investors all share one unseen trait. They understand that wealth serves best when it serves beyond the self. The companies that endure are not the ones that extract, but the ones that enrich. The individuals who rise are not those who hoard, but those who channel their abundance into something that sustains others. When your purpose becomes contribution, your reward becomes expansion. This is why detachment is not the enemy of prosperity, but its foundation. When we loosen our grip on control, when we stop demanding that every outcome arrive on our timeline in our form, we allow connection to take its place. Abundance is born not from possession, but from participation. The paradox is beautifully simple. The less you clutch at money, the more it flows toward you. The tighter you hold, the more it resists. It's as though life itself senses whether you trust it and responds in kind. When you act in service, when you use what you have to add value, the universe tends to return that energy amplified. It's not superstition. It's reciprocity woven into the very structure of existence. We often mistake control for security. We think that by tightening our hold on what we have, we'll feel more protected. Yet what usually happens is the opposite. We begin to fear loss more than we value freedom. We become trapped in the anxiety of maintaining, rather than the joy of creating. But the truth is, money is not something to be guarded. It's something to be guided. Like wind filling a sail, it propels those who understand its rhythm and humbles those who resist it. When you release your need to control every outcome, you enter the current of trust. And that current always leads to expansion. Imagine a world where every dollar was a seed. Some people would bury theirs in the ground, terrified of losing it. Others would plant it, tend it, and watch it multiply into forests. The difference isn't the seed, it's the spirit in which it's used. The same money that stagnates in one person's account can create opportunity, comfort, and growth in another's hands. Wealth isn't measured by possession, but by participation. How fully you allow yourself to be part of the greater circulation of life. The question is never how much do you have, but how much do you allow to move through you? When you begin to see money this way, a quiet transformation unfolds. Giving no longer feels like depletion. It feels like alignment. Receiving no longer feels like guilt. It feels like gratitude. Every transaction becomes a moment of trust, a conversation between you and the flow of life itself. You start to notice how opportunities appear when you least expect them, how help arrives when you thought you had none left, how abundance meets you exactly where generosity begins. The flow of money mirrors the flow of faith. Both require movement, both demand surrender, and both reward participation. In time, the measure of wealth shifts. It's no longer about how much you keep, but how much you contribute. Not because giving earns virtue points, but because it reveals maturity. The hoarder believes wealth gives power. The wise know wealth grants purpose. The more aligned you become with service, the more abundance finds its way to you, as though drawn by the gravity of gratitude. You stop chasing prosperity and start cooperating with it. You realize that success was never about domination. It was about harmony. And in that harmony, a stillness arises. Not the stillness of inactivity, but of understanding. You no longer need to prove or perform for abundance. You are part of its flow, and it moves through you as naturally as breath. The river doesn't question its direction, nor does it envy the sea it feeds. It simply flows, giving, receiving, and becoming more through the act of movement itself. Prosperity, you discover, is not an object to obtain, but a rhythm to align with. It is participation in life's ongoing exchange, the timeless circulation of giving, receiving, and growing. When you live in this awareness, wealth ceases to be something you chase. It becomes something you embody. You become both the giver and the receiver, both the river and the sea. You stop fearing loss because you've seen that nothing real is ever lost. It only changes form. And in that realization, you step into the true essence of financial freedom. Not the ability to hold tightly, but the wisdom to let life flow through you without resistance. Every road in this conversation leads back to one quiet truth. Financial freedom is less about the volume of your possessions and more about the shape of your character. When you strip away the flashy headlines and the overnight success stories, you find a simpler narrative beneath, one where the person who grows steady habits outlives the person who chases sudden gains. Becoming more means cultivating patience, sharpening judgment, and aligning daily actions with long-term values. It asks you to measure progress not by the digits that appear in your account, but by the steadiness of your decisions when the market wavers and when life asks for more of your courage than your comfort. The patterns that once triggered panic, late bills, missed paychecks, the small humiliations of scarcity, begin to tell a different story when viewed through the lens of mastery. Those same pressures become prompts for discipline instead of paralysis. You learn to budget not as punishment, but as practice in respecting future versions of yourself. You learn to invest not as a gamble, but as a choice to place small, deliberate bets on the compounding power of time and effort. Each repetition of restraint rewires your nervous system just as surely as any financial instrument rewires a portfolio. Discipline becomes the building block of trust in your own capacity to endure. What once felt like a crisis becomes, over time, an opportunity to observe rather than react. The frantic pulse that once drove many of your decisions, grab the sale, lock in the deal, hit the target, softens into a calmer cadence of assessment and intention. This is not complacency, it is clarity. It allows you to see when urgency is warranted and when it is an echo of old scarcity. In learning to watch your impulses without surrendering to them, you move from being acted upon by circumstances to acting from a place of purpose. That transformation reframes losses as lessons and setbacks as the raw material of refinement. As you grow internally, you gradually see wealth as a mirror of character, rather than a reflection of mere circumstance. The person who hoards in fear reveals a narrative of scarcity. The person who plans and shares reveals one of sufficiency. This perspective changes the questions you ask. You no longer fixate on, how can I get more? And instead consider, what kind of person do I want to be with what I already have? It's a softer question, but a more consequential one, because the answers shape behavior long before balance sheets can. Character becomes the silent engine behind sustainable prosperity. True success, when examined closely, is primarily internal. It's the peace that arrives when you no longer need external measures to validate your worth. That doesn't mean indifference to growth or a refusal to be ambitious. It means your ambition is rooted in contribution rather than compensation. When your actions come from service, wealth follows as a natural byproduct, not as the pursued trophy of an anxious heart. The paradox here is generous. The less you require money to prove you, the more freely it tends to arrive to enable the work you truly care about. The transformation from ambition as self-affirmation to ambition as service shifts your relationship to scarcity and gratitude. Scarcity was once the lens through which you interpreted reality. Gratitude becomes the lens that reorients it. When gratitude takes hold, your decisions begin to reflect abundance. You share knowledge, mentor younger colleagues, invest in ideas that light you up, even if they won't pay off immediately. Those acts are not naive. They are strategic in the deepest sense, because they compound reputationally and morally. Over time, the currency you care about moves from quick wins to durable wins. Relationships, reputation, and the calm confidence of a life built on intentional choices. Mastery arrives not as a dramatic coup, but as a steady unfolding. It is quiet, steady, and deeply human. It looks like consistency on ordinary days, the choice to show up when no one else sees, the refusal to let panic dictate moves. Mastery is measured in how well you steward yourself, your attention, your time, your choices. And from that stewardship flows a kind of wealth that outlasts markets and moods, the capacity to live with purpose, to use money as a tool rather than a tether, and to meet the future with composure. In that space, financial freedom is less a destination and more a natural consequence of who you have become. Hold that as your guiding question. Who do you have to become so that wealth is a reflection of your character and not merely a measure of circumstance? When you answer and begin to walk toward that person, your life rearranges itself around values that compound. Mastery does not guarantee ease, but it guarantees resilience. It promises that the money you earn will be in service of a life you recognize as yours, one shaped by presence, integrity, and an ever gentler capacity to give. That is the true return on investment, the kind that counts when the applause fades, and what remains is the quiet, durable peace of a life well lived. If we're honest, the struggle we've carried with money has never truly been about numbers on a screen or pieces of paper in a wallet. It has always been about control, the human desire to feel safe in a world that refuses to guarantee it. From an early age, we're told that money is the proof of stability, the shield against chaos, the thing that separates the strong from the vulnerable. And so we chase it, not because we love what it represents, but because we fear what life might look like without it. Each paycheck, each investment, each promotion whispers the same promise. Now you can breathe. But somehow, the exhale never fully comes. We don't want wealth so much as we want certainty, the sense that tomorrow won, to catch us unprepared. But here is the quiet truth most people discover only after years of striving. Safety cannot be bought, at least not the kind that brings peace. You can buy security systems and insurance, but you cannot buy ease in your heart. You can build empires and still lie awake at night worrying about what could be lost. The need to make it, that frantic drive to accumulate, is often a mask for a deeper longing. The desire to trust life again, to believe that we are held by something greater than our bank balance. Money became the stage upon which we performed our fears. Every financial decision, every risky investment or act of saving reflected not just strategy, but psychology. For some, the need to control every cent comes from a childhood of scarcity. The memory of bills stacked on kitchen tables and whispered arguments behind closed doors. For others, it's the opposite. Money was abundant but cold, used as a measure of love or worth. Either way, the imprint remains. We learn to equate money with power or protection, and we forget that it was meant to be a servant, not a master. The illusion of control comforts us, but it also traps us in cycles of anxiety. We grip harder, fearing that loosening our hold will invite loss. But life, in its own quiet wisdom, keeps showing us the opposite. The more we grasp, the less we feel free. The tighter we cling to control, the smaller our world becomes, and at some point, if we're fortunate, exhaustion forces us to look deeper. We begin to notice that real security doesn't arise from the things we own. It flows from the trust we cultivate in ourselves, in time, and in life itself. The person who believes in their ability to adapt, to create, to recover from loss, carries a wealth that no market fluctuation can touch. That kind of wealth is invisible but indestructible. It's the foundation of inner peace. Awareness changes everything. When we start to see money for what it truly is, an instrument of exchange, a symbol of trust, a reflection of value, the emotional charge begins to dissolve. The old tension that used to live in our chest when we thought about finances starts to soften. We stop seeing money as an enemy to conquer or a prize to capture and begin seeing it as a conversation between who we are and what we give to the world. It stops being about survival and starts becoming about expression. Every dollar we earn or spend becomes an extension of our choices, our integrity, our creativity. The energy shifts from fear to flow. Acceptance replaces striving. Instead of trying to prove ourselves through financial achievement, we begin to accept where we are, fully and without shame. This doesn't mean we abandon ambition. It means ambition no longer holds us hostage. We can still build, still plan, still grow, but now those actions come from clarity, not compulsion. There's a world of difference between chasing money to fill a void and attracting it from a place of wholeness. The first path drains us, the second sustains us. Acceptance doesn't mean apathy. It means peace with progress, even when it's slow. Clarity, too, becomes our ally. Once the fog of fear clears, decisions that once felt heavy begin to simplify. We no longer ask, "What will this make me?" but "What does this mean to me?" We spend more consciously, not to impress, but to express. We invest more wisely, not to compete, but to contribute, but to. And the remarkable thing is that this mindset doesn't just change how we feel. It often changes what we attract. Money, like energy, gravitates toward harmony. When we respect it without worshipping it, use it without clinging to it, and circulate it without guilt, it tends to multiply naturally. It's as if the universe recognizes alignment and responds in kind. Peace, the kind we once hoped wealth would deliver, begins to bloom quietly inside. It is not the loud peace of arrival or accomplishment. It is the still peace of understanding. You start noticing it in the pauses, in the way you no longer panic when plans change, in the way you no longer envy someone else's success. It's the peace that comes from knowing that you are no longer chasing ghosts, that you can let money move through your life as it's meant to, fluidly, respectfully, purposefully. The irony is almost poetic. The less you need money to define you, the more gracefully it seems to find you. And then one day, almost without noticing, you wake up and realize that the entire pursuit, the endless striving, the worry, the restlessness, was never about money at all. You weren't chasing numbers. You were chasing freedom from yourself, the freedom to feel safe in your own skin, the freedom to believe that you are enough, even without the armor of wealth or the validation of success. What a relief that realization brings, to know that the peace you sought was never locked behind financial gates, but quietly waiting within your own awareness. Healing your relationship with money doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds like any deep healing, slowly, gently, through moments of honesty and grace. But once it begins, life starts to feel lighter. You make choices from abundance, not fear. You give because you want to, not because you're trying to prove something. You receive without guilt, recognizing that prosperity is not a zero-sum game. And in that balance count between giving and receiving, effort and ease, you rediscover what freedom was always meant to feel like, the absence of fear and the presence of trust. This is where the real work begins, and the real wealth takes root. When money ceases to be the object of obsession and becomes a mirror of inner harmony, everything shifts. Your world expands. Opportunities flow more easily. Relationships deepen. Creativity blossoms. Because you are no longer fighting against life, you are moving with it. And perhaps, in the quiet of that realization, you'll smile at the simplest truth of all, that financial freedom was never about escaping your circumstances, but about coming home to yourself. Gratitude has a quiet way of changing the shape of desire. When you begin to notice what is already working, the frantic edge of wanting softens into something warmer, appreciation. This is not a sentimental softness, but a practical recalibration. Gratitude turns the rifle sight focus on more into a wide, steady view of enough. Suddenly, the ambitions that once felt like urgent survival strategies begin to look like invitations to deepen, not to chase. The energy that was spent on proving and acquiring is gradually redirected toward tending what already exists: relationships, skills, and small reserves of time and attention. And that shift alone changes how money moves through your life. There is a surprising economy to needing less. You might assume abundance arrives only when your income rises, but often it arrives when your needs shrink. The story is simple. When you train your mind to require less external validation, you free up a surprising amount of bandwidth to create real value. Imagine trimming the constant background noise of comparison and desire. What remains is focus. With fewer urgent wants, you make clearer decisions, you save more easily, and you invest attention into projects that compound. In practice, this does not mean renouncing ambition. It means aligning ambition with what matters so that each step forward is chosen, not compelled. Humility takes root in that space, but it's not the kind of humility born from defeat. It is a humble confidence that comes from seeing the larger field of life's generosity. When you experience that generosity, a mentor's time, an unexpected kindness, an opportunity that appears because of someone else's faith in you, humility becomes a teacher. It reminds you that you are part of networks and systems far bigger than your solitary striving. This humility stabilizes ambition. It converts hunger into stewardship. Instead of using wealth to prove worth, you begin to use it to honor the web of people and chance that supported your path. With gratitude and humility in place, peace becomes available even amid imperfection. Life does not suddenly tidy itself. Accidents happen, markets wobble, and relationships strain. But the interior experience changes. You find that a calm mind can hold uncertainty without collapsing into panic. The same bank balance that once triggered anxiety now feels like information rather than indictment. Peace, in this sense, is a muscle strengthened by small practices. Pausing before a purchase, saying thank you aloud, choosing understated home comforts over conspicuous consumption. These practices accumulate like compound interest on the soul, giving you reserve when the storms come. As this inner reserve builds, money itself starts to feel different, less like the centerpiece of your identity, and more like a stream in a larger ecosystem. Where once every transaction felt freighted with meaning, most exchanges become matter of fact. A bill paid, an investment placed, a gift given. The drama dissipates because you no longer measure your self-worth by your ledger. You begin to treat money as energy that supports purpose, rather than as proof that you exist. In this calmer register, generosity becomes manageable and receiving becomes dignified. Both actions serve to keep the flow alive without the drama that scarcity breeds. You begin to measure your life by the quiet metrics that matter. How much time you wake without dread. How often you can be present with a friend without checking your phone. How often you do meaningful work that makes you forget to look at the clock. These are not glamorous statistics, and they won't headline your social profiles, but they are the true indicators of a life aligned with enough. The external trappings may remain or change, but the internal barometer grows steadier. Wealth becomes less of a trophy and more of a tool, a means of making these quieter metrics more abundant for yourself and for others. And then something almost simple happens. You rediscover the beauty of being enough. It is not a dramatic revelation, so much as a settling into a posture that feels like coming home. The restless ambition that drove you once still exists, but it no longer defines every decision. It is tempered by appreciation and tempered by purpose. You notice gratitude in small moments, a meal shared, a quiet walk, the ease of doing good work. And these moments stitch together into a life that feels coherent and true. He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have, the Stoics remind us, and their words echo a practical wisdom. Contentment is not resignation. It is a clearer platform from which you can act with generosity and courage. This is not a call to settle for mediocrity. It is a call to settle into a place from which you can choose more wisely. When enough becomes your baseline, choices sharpen and your energy aligns with what endures. Ambition remains, but it is now an engine for contribution rather than a mechanism for proving worth. The quiet power of enough converts the restlessness of scarcity into the steady work of meaning. And in that steady work, you find that abundance was not a distant prize but a companion you had been invited to meet all along. The hidden laws of financial freedom are quieter than the flashy headlines would have you believe. They do not arrive as tactics or shortcuts, as viral strategies or one-night transformations. They arrive as alignment, a steady interior posture that eventually rearranges your outer life. When you begin to move with the principles that actually govern prosperity, your choices shift from frantic transaction to considered contribution. Alignment looks like consistency, showing up when it's hard, saying no when it dilutes your purpose, and tending the small practices that compound into lasting change. It is less about trying every trick in the book, and more about becoming the kind of person who naturally makes the right choices, even when no one is watching. Value creates wealth in a way that is unsurprising and yet endlessly overlooked. You can chase margins or chase meaning. The former might pay off briefly, but the latter builds stores that sustain. When your work actually solves a problem, eases a pain, or brings genuine joy, you create something that people will trade for again and again. Patience is the soil that allows that value to take root. Without it, even the best ideas wither before they can bear fruit. Purpose is the compass. It gives direction to your patience and focus to your efforts, turning a life of erratic wins into one of cumulative gains. There is a small but profound distinction between using money as an object of anxiety and using it as a servant of purpose. The anxious mind hoards and secures, the purposeful mind circulates and invests. True abundance feels different because it is lived differently. It is experienced as usefulness rather than accumulation, as presence rather than possession. As Napoleon Hill once observed, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. That thought reminds us that our internal landscape, what we expect, what we decide is possible, shapes external reality in ways every spreadsheet struggles to quantify. When your beliefs align with long-term thinking, the habits that follow are the ones that quietly build wealth. Perhaps the most liberating revelation is that what we were chasing was rarely out there in the first place. We thought that a number, a title, a status would finally settle the unrest inside us. Instead, the real prize was clarity, the capacity to see how our actions echoed our values, and which of those actions we wished to keep. Seeing clearly changes everything. You stop treating money as the goal and start treating it as feedback. Financial outcomes become signals that tell you whether you are delivering value, stewarding wisely, and inhabiting your purpose with integrity. That shift turns growth from a desperate aim into a probable outcome. When you understand money as reflection, growth becomes an inevitable byproduct rather than a frantic pursuit. Your attention moves from short-term wins to durable systems, learning that compounds, relationships that mature, products that improve with iteration. Morgan Housel put it simply when he said, "Spending today is a vote for the kind of person you want to be tomorrow." That sentence is both tender and exact. It ties behavior to identity and suggests that wealth accrues to those who consistently vote for the future they prefer. The quiet work of voting well every day compounds into a life that, over time, looks like the one you intended. Peace becomes the greatest return on investment when you stop measuring success by applause and start measuring it by steadiness. The calm that arrives through disciplined habits and purposeful giving is not the absence of problems. It is the muscle built to handle them. You still face setbacks, but setbacks in a life built on alignment are met as data rather than disaster. The rhythm shifts from panic to practice. Losses become lessons and setbacks become turning points. This is the kind of wealth that survives market cycles and personal storms because it is rooted in character and systems, not in luck or transient advantage. Money, seen clearly, is never the destination. It is the mirror showing who you become along the way. If you fear without learning, you will hoard. If you act without meaning, you will splurge. If you align without patience, you will stumble. But when you cultivate value, practice patience, and choose purpose, the mirror reflects steadiness, the quiet dignity of a life that builds rather than burns. The real work is interior. It is the slow art of becoming someone fit for the responsibility of abundance, someone whose hands are steady enough to receive and generous enough to return. So let this be the final, simple instruction. Choose alignment over tactics, value over vanity, and patience over panic. Let your ambitions be guided by service, your strategies by integrity, and your daily acts by the person you wish to become. As you do, money will cease to dominate your story and will instead play its appointed role, a tool that amplifies meaning and a mirror that reflects maturity. When that moment arrives, you will find that you already have what most people spend a lifetime hunting for. Not a fuller bank account alone, but a fuller, freer life. Thank you for walking this journey of reflection, not merely toward wealth, but toward wisdom. If you've listened closely, you've likely realized that this was never about learning how to chase more, but about remembering how to become more. Wealth, in its truest sense, was never a race to the top. It was a rhythm, a way of living that blends awareness, gratitude, and trust into every decision. And the deeper you go into that rhythm, the more you understand that the goal was never financial freedom alone. It was inner freedom, the kind that can't be shaken by circumstance or stolen by uncertainty. You see, what we've explored together are not rules carved in stone, but laws written into the fabric of life itself. They don't need enforcement because they are already in motion. They reward alignment, not ambition, authenticity, not aggression. The law of growth reminds us that true progress is patient, that wealth is a garden, not a gamble. The law of detachment shows us that control is an illusion, and that peace comes when we release our grip and let life breathe. The law of reflection teaches that every financial decision is a mirror, revealing who we are long before it changes what we have. These are not abstract philosophies. They are living truths that quietly govern both prosperity and peace. In a world obsessed with more speed, more success, more validation, choosing to live by these hidden laws is a quiet rebellion. It's a choice to return to rhythm instead of reaction. You begin to see that prosperity has never been about accumulation, but circulation, not about hoarding, but harmonizing. Money flows like water. It nourishes when it moves, it stagnates when it's trapped. So when you give, when you invest, when you contribute, you are not losing. You are participating in the grand current of life that keeps abundance alive. There's a beautiful paradox here. When you stop chasing money, you often find that it starts finding you. Not because of some mystical trick, but because your energy shifts from desperation to clarity. You begin to operate from alignment, not anxiety. You become the kind of person who creates value without force, who attracts opportunities without manipulation, who makes choices that serve both purpose and prosperity. That is the quiet confidence of someone who trusts the process, who has learned that the market may fluctuate, but principles never do. The truest wealth, as we've said, is a mind at ease and a heart that gives freely. Think about that for a moment. A mind at ease is one that no longer confuses busyness for progress. It knows how to rest as deeply as it knows how to work. It is not enslaved by comparison, nor shaken by scarcity. And a heart that gives freely is one that understands abundance not as a privilege, but as a responsibility. the chance to contribute to the same flow that once nourished you. Together, those two, peace of mind and generosity of heart, form the foundation of a life that feels both grounded and expansive. You may notice as you apply these principles that wealth begins to lose its drama. The highs and lows still come, but they no longer define you. You start to measure success differently, by the quality of your thoughts, the calmness of your mornings, the depth of your gratitude. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. It's the moment you stop trading your peace for promises of someday. It is the day you realize that financial freedom was never about escaping work. It was about finding work that feels aligned with who you are becoming. Every ending carries an echo of beginning, and so it is here. The journey doesn't end with the last word. It deepens in your daily choices, in how you spend, how you save, how you serve. Each small decision is a dialogue with life, a statement of trust or fear. And when those choices come from clarity rather than compulsion, you begin to notice a quiet transformation. The tension softens, the inner noise quiets. Money returns to its rightful place, not as a ruler, but as a reflection of rhythm and purpose. I hope you carry this understanding gently. You were never broken, and wealth was never the cure. You were only disconnected, from rhythm, from patience, from the truth that abundance begins within. Reconnection is the real return on investment. Each time you pause before reacting, each time you give without expectation, each time you choose purpose over panic, you strengthen the invisible threads that tie your inner world to outer prosperity. And in that strengthening, peace becomes not a prize, but a natural state. If you've ever felt behind, remember this. There is no timeline for awakening. The universe is not rushing you. Growth that lasts is growth that honors timing. Whether you're rebuilding, restarting, or simply realigning, know that your worth has never depended on your wealth. The market can't measure it. The world can't define it. It's written in how you live, not just in what you earn. The calm you carry as that quiet confidence born of alignment is the clearest sign that you've already stepped into prosperity. And so, as this chapter closes, take a deep breath. Let the lessons settle where they belong, not in the mind alone, but in the heart. This is not goodbye, but a gentle invitation to live with presence instead of pursuit, to walk with rhythm instead of rush. May your days unfold with patience, your work flow with purpose, and your wealth serve as an instrument of peace. The journey continues, not in striving, but in stillness, not in chasing, but in becoming. Because once you understand these hidden laws, once you have seen how prosperity follows alignment, you can never really return to living unconsciously again. The truth changes you quietly and forever. And when one day you look back on your life, on the choices made, the fears faced, the wisdom earned, you will realize something simple yet profound. You didn't just build wealth. You built wholeness. You didn't just accumulate assets. You cultivated awareness. And in doing so, you became the kind of person who can hold abundance with grace, share it without fear, and live from it with peace. That is the gentle power of understanding. That is the real flow of prosperity. And now, as this journey finds its still point, may you walk forward not in pursuit, but in presence.